So if you weren't aware, we're actually filming a show tonight that you all will be a part of.
It's a live show.
It's a live show. So that will be edited ferociously.
That sounds great.
Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, and... Okay, in case you hadn't worked it out, we are live from Riff City Guitar in New Hope, Minnesota.
Awesome.
And what a crazy experience this is. We have 52, I believe, Joe? 52? 53. 53 people that have traveled from far and wide. One gentleman here has come all the way from New Mexico? New Mexico, which is about, I don't know, 10 million miles away. And yeah, we're recording a show live. We're going to cover some, what we're going to call That Pedal Show fundamentals across a bunch of topics.
Cool. Okay. So this is something that we have touched on the show loads. We're going to talk about gain stacking. We did put a little questionnaire out and asked what people would like, they'd like us to see cover live. And so these are a bunch of suggestions that have come in. So we're going to quickly talk about gain stacking. Now, when we talk about gain stacking, the idea is taking pedals that have gain and putting them together to create different sounds.
Yeah, and it might not just be overdrive. It might be any kind of gain makeup. That could be a boost. It could be, because you're starting with your amp, right? And you're adding gain and level on top of that. So it might not necessarily be about high gain, even though, we like that. Do we like that? Do we like high gain? Yeah, good. For a minute, I thought I was in the wrong room. So we have two amps set up here. We've got two amps that we picked because of their popularity and their kind of type. So we've got a Fender Deluxe Reverb. Everyone familiar with that? 22 watt 6v6s, reverb and tremolo. It's the amp of ages. It's the amp that's been used on countless recordings, much loved for very good reason. This one actually has 12-inch speaker, some kind of, we'll find out what that is later. Victory Sheriff 22, which is a more modern take on Marshall Plexi style amp. This one actually has EL84s, so it's not quite as aggressive. as like a 50 watt plexi or a 100 watt plexi, but it's got that thing, and together they make a very nice noise. Is that me?
That's me.
Excellent.
Do you want me?
Yeah, no, go for it. This is the Fender. That was the Sheriff, and this is them together. Set up as we would consider a clean platform. If you hit them hard with boosters and stuff, they will both overdrive a little bit, but the way Dan and I tend to like to do it is to keep the amps fairly clean so they have plenty of headroom so that the gain pedals keep their character. It's not all the time, but that's where we start.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So let's look at
Boost.
Let's look at a boost. All right. So this is mix side of the D&M drive. If you want to have swang with that, sir. Oh, hang on.
Just a little bit of single coil hum as well. Lights. We like it. The good news about hum is you can't hear it when you play it.
Man, hang on, let me hear that with this. That's awesome. Okay, there's a fundamental characteristic about that boost. And you'll hear that when it's not on, and just the amp itself, it has this smiley frequency about it. So there's not a whole heap of mids. It's a lovely warm bottom end. It's fairly tight though, because we're open back. This is closed back, isn't it? Yeah, but it's the 22 watt version that doesn't have the bass response of the large version. It's lovely, it's amazing, but it has that smiley thing. Now, when I kick the mix side of the D&M drive in, you'll hear the mids come back. So.
Players of Strats will love that for obvious reasons, because if you just turn it off for a sec, it's really nice when you've got your Strat in the in-between position, I mean, that's a Strat sound that we all really like. Right? Really, really lovely and bouncy and clean, but when it comes to solo and you're if you're playing at 3,000 watts and your sound guy likes you, you'll hear that, but chances are not so much. So just the little mid kick. I've just realised that you're not allowed to play that in a guitar shop.
Is that the new one?
For anyone who doesn't know, that is the new Stairway.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And and what you'll hear as well, it didn't go all fuzzy and dirty, right? All we did then was change that shape. A really important thing about that concept as well is who here plays in a band? Awesome. Okay, who here plays regularly with other musicians, whether it's in a band or not? Okay, awesome. The concept about this is when you're playing with other musicians, you've got a bass player and a drummer and a keyboard player if you have to have a keyboard player, you'll have a keyboard player. And what's happening is they're taking up a whole bunch of frequency range. And a sound like that helps the guitar sit really well in the mix. One thing about doing gigs, you can have an amazing rhythm sound. If you use that same sound for a solo sound, the generally, the sound guy doesn't give two hoots, and he's not going to push you up. So having that bit of a mid-range kick, it really helps you be prominent in the mix. And there's a bunch of really great examples of this. I'm a big Fleetwood Mac fan. And when you hear those solos, and the guitar is so quiet in the mix, but yet just his frequencies, they sit. It doesn't matter how quiet they're pulled down in the mix. You're going to hear every note that he plays. That having something that gives you the ability just to boost that mid range. Now it can be an EQ pedal even. One great thing about having something like a Tube Screamer or a Klon or boost of the D&M, it also adds a tiny bit of compression as well. So when you go from this, there's no way we're going to get through all these.
You're going to have to hurry up.
Sorry. All right. So if you hear when I dig in, this is without any boost on. When I dig in. There is a really large dynamic range there. As soon as I put the booster on, that dynamic range is lessened, yeah? And as I dig in, it starts to overdrive. You start to hit the rails and it starts to compress, which is, it's awesome, or clip. And so it makes your notes even, but without getting all fuzzy. It's very cool. Very cool.
And when we're talking about boosts, that's not creating a problem for us now. It's actually solving a few problems, because actually you might want that little bit of extra feel under the fingers, so it's not so squanky clean. However, if we'll just put on a dip. So you were just listening to the mix side of the D&M. Oh, you can't talk about yourself in the third person. You were listening to my side of the D&M drive, which is a mid-boosty thing. We'll put a different boost on now, which is the Bad Bob by Analog Man, which is just a full range booster, which has a very different character. So it's largely just the same but louder, right?
So what would the difference between a compressor pedal and a booster pedal be? Could you interchange those two if you were?
Absolutely. Compression is another gain pedal.
Yep.
It's limiting the dynamic range, but they tried to not fundamentally change your tone. And compressors are fascinating. There's been a big lately. Everyone's putting mixers and things in their compression pedal, because what generally happens is, if you've got a compressor that has a fast attack, it'll take that dynamic range and really quickly reduce it, and then bring the soft notes up to the same level. But what generally, I'm really struggling with generally tonight. Generally, what happens is there's a perceived loss in top end when it compresses quickly. So by adding a little bit of a mix there, it gives the initial attack and that transient response, which is really important. A very brief digress. When
I think we're in for the night.
Yeah. So those transients, the transients of a guitar, they are all important. Those first couple of milliseconds of the attack, the pick on the strings, is everything. So getting that right is hugely important. Compressors are awesome, and they limit very differently to like an overdrive pedal, but absolutely a huge important thing to understand about gain structure.
That's the point. It's absolutely central to this whole discussion of gain stacking, because all we've done is boost so far. Once we start adding overdrive and distortion, that's where the cool sounds come for certain genres, but it's also where the problems start to come. And I'm gonna let me go on a limb and guess here. For anyone who does gain stack pedals, the biggest problem you have is balancing level and audibility, for want of a better word. So you get to your moment, you step on the next gain pedal because you think it's gonna lift you up soaring heroically like Slash. And actually it just gets quieter and it kind of goes away. Has anyone experienced that? Okay. That's the central tenet of any discussion about gain stacking. Maybe we can demonstrate a little bit of that. So if we got a little bit into overdrive, so let's up the gain,
okay,
and we'll stack a couple things together and kind of show you how that works. So a good example of this would be, let's say I was running some gain in the boost side of the D&M drive. Oh man, that sounds good. Joe very kindly lent me this Strat for today. It's a limited edition custom shop. 59, it costs about $8 million, and it's very nice. I'm going to try and... I've got a few bags here, and I think if I take the neck off, it might just go in. So even with quite a lot of overdrive there, there's still definition in the notes, right? If we add the drive side of the D&M and we put it after, boost first. There was loads and loads and loads and loads of extra drive, but if we were in a band, by the way, if it's too loud, apologies, but it's the way it is. Yeah, if it's too loud, you're too old. Or something. Who said that? Anyway, you might have noticed that Dan and I like to play at a certain level because that's when the amps start breathing. When we stepped on the drive side after the boost, that was that moment. You know, I'm getting ready in the November Rain bit. Axel stood there at the altar with, she's happy, everything's good. And I step up to the edge of that cliff. Wasn't there a cliff in the middle of this flat desert? Am I remembering that right? Anyway, stand on my gain pedal, it's gone. You can't hear anything under the cymbals and everything else, all the hubbub of the rest of the band.
So essentially what's happened there, this is my side without the boost going into it. And that sounds great. Now, the issue is when we take that boost, that's got a lot of boost, if we put that into the front end, what's happening is I'm taking the dynamics of this guitar and I'm reducing it and I'm increasing the signal and I'm punching that in to that distortion sound. All that's happening is I'm taking this sound that's already clipping and I'm smashing the front of that, so all I'm getting is these square edges. I've lost any dynamic, any hope of being expressive, and it's just a noise. So there are a couple of things I can do. One, I can reduce the gain going into the front end, and instead of making it more of an overdrive pedal, just use the shape of that mid-range. So if I turn the gain down.
Dan's just turned the gain down on the boost side of the D&M drive.
So without it, with it. Okay, now, this is my side. I'm going to punch it with the mid-range. That's okay. It works fine. But genuinely, what's another word apart from generally?
Usually.
Usually.
Yeah. Invariably. Although no, that means not variably.
What I would do, if that was my solo tone, instead of boosting the input, I'd actually boost the output.
So what you've heard so far is, if you imagine your pedal board, the boost is in front of the drive, right? So the boost is closer to your guitar. You're boosting it, then it hits your overdrive. What we're going to do now is swap them around. So we're going to hit the overdrive first, then we're going to hit the boost after.
I can work with that. So now what happened there, I had that, my side doesn't change the fundamental frequencies. It's like an overdrive distortion. For me, that works really well, especially with singers, because that sort of a sound, you'll still hear the vocal on top. If I had a really mid-heavy overdrive sound in a band situation, that sort of sound really fights with the vocals.
And that goes for pedals like the full tone OCD, basically any overdrive distortion that doesn't massively change the EQ curve, that isn't mid-humped, right? That isn't a tube scream
Killing Mod
style.
Blues Driver.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah. But for the solo thing, what I did was I added that mid-range hump, but after it. So I changed the shape of the sound and gave it some love. And instead of changing the fundamental characteristic of the gain of the input, it came with the output. So it was all lovely.
Yeah.
And answered all the questions.
And in the context of gain stacking, this is important because the amps are running with a lot of headroom, right? So we can hit those amps with more and more and more and more level, and they'll keep getting louder for quite a while, actually. If the amp was really overdriving, if it was, if we had the Victory cranked so it had loads of overdrive, you would never get that. No matter how much level you boost, it would just squash.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know if any of you have come across that. If you use gain in the amp, you hit it with a pedal, nothing happens. It just gets quieter.
Yeah.
You lose a lot of definition.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It's just because it's doing the same thing. The amp is doing the same thing as the pedal was when I was hitting the front end of the pedal.
Right.
The amp is just getting that front end where, the amp might be, if you look at the waveform and it's clipping of it, lovely. And all I'm doing, I'm not increasing the volume, I'm just increasing the input. And that starts to just become more compressed. You're not getting any more level out of it. A caveat, is that the right word? So there are boost pedals made to boost the front of an overdriven amplifier. All right, treble boost is a really good example. If you listen to a treble booster going into a clean amplifier, it's a horrific experience. And I remember listening to my first treble boost going, why on earth would anyone use that? But then you get an amplifier that, it's cranked and it's sounding awesome. You put a treble booster into that amplifier and all the bottom end gets tightened up, and those upper mid-range frequencies, as opposed to, they call it a treble booster, but most of them have this upper mid-range character.
Yeah,
and
what is it, 2K plus, 1K
Yeah,
plus?
between 2 and 6.
Anyway, quick tangent on frequencies. Everyone familiar with kind of where the key, so the tube screamer honk, about 500 hertz. Really bright sibilancy kind of presency stuff, 10K plus. Frequency to get your guitar cutting through a mix, anywhere between upper 2s and 4K. That's a really key frequency area to get you heard. It sounds quite trebly. So when we talk about mids and trebles, those are the terms that we're working in.
Yeah, and those frequencies, when they hit the front of an overdriven amplifier, they poke through. So Brian May, that's his sound, cranked AC30s, but with that treble booster, and it just pushes. I mean, he used other amps apart from AC30s, he had that, it's like a pig nose.
The D key.
thing, the D key. And that was a really important part of his, especially his solo sounds, because where the Voxes were cranked and compressing and sounding glorious, but what the D key did, it just added a little bit more of note definition back for those
And it
solo
had
things.
absolutely no bass.
Yeah.
So once you mix it in a mix with drums and bass and the rest of the band, doesn't matter. You don't need the bass at
Yeah.
that point because all it needs to do is cut.
And that's another, we didn't even write this down, but the bass thing, that's another whole really important conversation to have.
We are now going off on a massive tangent.
Yeah.
If you are having that issue of you're running a gainy amp and you're sticking a pedal in the front and it's not happening, the common fix, if your amp has an effects loop, is to try something like a boost in the effects loop. Depending on where the master volume is placed in the circuit, everyone heard of a post-phase inverter master volume? Some amps have it. So for those who don't know, preamp tubes up the front. The last little tube in most valve amps is the phase inverter. That's what basically does the job into the power section. And where the master volume is in relation to that phase inverter tube depends whether this will work or not. However, on most amps it does work. You can put a boost in the effects loop and you will get that boost. You will get a level boost instead of running it in the front. So we're deep down a rabbit hole. We've been going about 20 minutes probably. Where this gets really chewy, deliberate use of the word for most people, is fuzz. I think.
Anyone here struggle with fuzz? Okay.
Anyone here not like fuzz? Anyone here dislike fuzz? Take it or leave it. Yeah. We get a lot, whenever we do anything on fuzz on the show, we always get comments that say, fuzz.
Fuzz.
I can hear, I'm reading words, but that's the sound I can hear. It's like, fuzz. I'm not interested. I'm going to demonstrate.
Because most people lose the definition, kind of the problem with, this,
Yeah.
like you were saying, the signal being
Yeah.
pushed through the amp.
We're gonna show you a couple ways around that. I'm going to demonstrate the sound of a Analog Man Sunface NKT red dot fuzz on full fuzz through these two amps. Okay?
Ready?
Yep. And I promise you, this is what you're hearing. Except you're not. Is it on?
There it's on.
Where's the on key? Can I have some delay, Dan?
Yes.
Who believes that's a red dot NKT fuzz on full? Yeah, right. Why? Yeah, I've got the volume down on the guitar. Fuzz faces especially are so unbelievably sensitive to the where
Usually.
you're- Yeah, I've got you know what? I actually think we might be a bit nervous. That might be the truth. So I'm going to cure the nerves by showing you what it actually sounds like with the volume up full, right?
Awesome.
That's
Just awesome.
That's the fuzzy horrible mess you're talking about. How do we get some definition on that? We learned something 2 days ago. Actually, I learned something. Dan had something reconfirmed, right, about the buffer thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. So fuzzes, they're a fascinating pedal. It's a very simple circuit, but it is so dynamic. I'm assuming anyone who knows about fuzzes has heard about the way that fuzzes interact with buffers, right? Does anyone here not know what a buffer is? Any hands?
Be honest.
Okay,
Okay,
be
good.
honest?
Yep.
Yep, okay, right. So buffer is simply a one-to-one amplifier and it changes the impedance of the signal. So what that means is the level coming out of the guitar, it has, let's say, the inductance of the coil is coming down the cable. This cable has what's called capacitance in it. And what's coming out of, let's say we've got a 7.6K, which is what all bridge pickups on Telecasters should be, coming out of the cable.
I'm going to say 7.2, but...
Okay. And that, the relationship that the pickup has with the inductance, with the capacitance in the cable is massive. So basically, tone control on your guitar, right, is a capacitor. And what the capacitor does, as I turn this down, what it's doing is, it is the signal going through the capacitor is then bled to ground. So the capacitor, if you imagine, is like a high pass filter, and that high pass is being bled to ground, all right, and turning the tone control into basically a low pass filter. Does that make sense to everyone? The capacitor in here does exactly the same job as the capacitor in the cable. Right, got a pedal board, you've got a whole bunch of pedals together, right? Each foot switch, each patch cable, then the cable then go back to the amplifier. That's all added capacitance. A buffer will drive that capacitance so it can make a very dull sound nice and bright.
Has anyone experienced plugging in a bunch of pedals into your amp, you play your guitar and you go, where's all the high end gone? Anyone experienced that? Yep. Okay. That's what Dan's talking about.
Yep. So pedals like Ibanez pedals and Boss pedals and those pedals that we grew up with, they all have buffers in them. And the buffer is on when the pedal is bypassed. Okay? Right. Fuzz becomes popular.
For anyone who doesn't know, and sorry if this is too simplistic, the difference between true bypass and buffered bypass is exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So when the pedal is off in the true bypass, okay, everyone can't. When a true bypass pedal is off, there's no buffer on the output. When a buffered bypass pedal is off, there is a buffer, right? Is that clear enough?
So Fuzz becomes, Fuzz has always been popular, but Analog Man and a bunch of builders start making these amazing fuzzes using these old germanium transistors and these awesome silicon transistors. It's like, these are awesome. And then some guy says, I'll put it on my pedal board and it sounds really shrill and harsh and I can't use it. Fuzz pedals, they say fuzz pedals need to be at the start of your chain because it's really important that the fuzz is seeing the inductance from these pickups. If I have a buffer between this and that fuzz pedal, it's going to react very differently.
That's why that relationship with the volume pot and the fuzz is so sensitive. I don't know if you noticed. So put up with the hum, but here we go. Here's full fuzz, right?
Hitting the signal, it's hitting the buffer.
No, we haven't got into buffers yet.
That was just the guitar.
That's just
the guitar. So if you can imagine the fuzz, the signal's coming in, this square wave, as we add some resistance to the beginning of that, instead of it square waving, it's now just softening off the edges. The sign, the signal is the same amplitude, but we're just not distorting it as much. It's just not clipping those frequencies as much. If I put a buffer between that, so I can do that hopefully quite simply. Let's put a buffer on the input. And this is going to sound harsh and horrible, and I apologize straight away, but this is mixed guitar signal with a buffer at the input. And you'll hear that hasn't really fundamentally changed the sound of his guitar. But now, if I put the fuzz after that buffer, Stop. So that's what everyone hates. And people say, "Oh, yeah, I really struggle with the fuzz. It sounds awful." Yes, that is awful. So it's really important that you understand the relationship between, if you want to get into fuzzes, the way that the buffers work with fuzzes. Okay, but
that's why if you've got your buffered bypass wah-wah and a traditional fuzz, it hurts the fuzz to come after the wah. When you step on the wah, all other crazy things happen. But even before that, that's exactly what's happening there. And that's the most common question about fuzz, which way around with the wah and the fuzz. Some fuzzes, we should say as a caveat, are kind of engineered for this and designed around it. We're talking about vintage style fuzz faces specifically, and other vintage style fuzzes, particularly if they use germanium transistors.
Yes.
Okay, so...
Well, how long have we been going?
So where would you put the wah then in this setup?
Okay, that's a very good question.
Yeah.
I would put a true bypass wah still at the front. What happens if you imagine when you're sweeping your wah pedal and you've got this, you're basically sweeping the frequency like an antenna looking for a radio station. You're sweeping those, and when I'm in the heel down position, there's almost no top end going into the fuzz. As I sweep forward, yes, you're going to get those sounds, but it's almost par for the course when you're using a wah pedal, because I'm fundamentally changing the frequencies anyway. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm not just adding a tonal coloration to the fuzz. What I'm trying to do is have these drastic changes in sound by going wow, wow with the wah pedal, but not with your mouth.
Well, I don't know. I've yet to meet a human being who can't move their mouth when they're doing the wah, right?
So I would still put it at the front, but experiment and put it if you put it on the other side of the fuzz, it's a less drastic sounding sweep on the wah pedal, but experiment.
Yeah. And bear in mind, we were talking about when the wah is off, it affecting the fuzz.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've heard a buffer before the fuzz. Let's put a buffer after the fuzz. This is really interesting. This is when I said I'd learned something in the last couple of days and Dan had something reconfirmed. This can be useful, right? So something to think about. So let's go with the straight sound of the sun face again, because it's awesome. Goodness. We're going to add the Bad Bob booster after the fuzz because it has a buffer in it. Does it work with the booster off? The buffer off?
No,
no,
it's got to be on.
Okay. I don't know if you could hear that, but you just get that sibilancy high end back. Yeah. So we're gain stacking. We're still gain stacking. We're adding a boost after a fuzz.
So the point about this is, it's not just the buffers at the input of the fuzz you need to be aware of. It's also buffers after, especially with germanium fuzzes. I had my first custom-built fuzz pedal built in Australia. I spent a fortune on this thing. This guy had these amazing transistors, and I got it. It was awesome. I was blown away. And then I heard a Memory Man delay, and I thought, they just re-released the big box Memory Mans. It was like the first reissue of those, and I put my fuzz on, and then I hit the Memory Man, and I'm like, no, my delay pedal's broken. It's awful. And I was like, I took it back to the shop. Says, just this doesn't work. So they had another one there. Grabbed that, took it home. Exactly the same thing. Then I took out my Kitty Mono Blues driver, put it before it didn't change the sound at all. So it's the fuzz pedal is fascinating because it's not just on the input; it's also on the output. with some fuzz pedals, it's less pronounced. And it can be really cool to put a buffer after a fuzz pedal because it'll, if you can work with the sound of the buffer after the fuzz pedal, well, then everything after that's going to work nicely as well.
It's a fantastic example of the whole fundamental basic of that pedal show, which is there are no answers, only better questions, right? So if you go onto certain forums and someone says, can I use a buffer with a fuzz pedal? No. Well, that's not the answer. The answer is a better question. What's the buffer and where is it? And if you understand...
And what's the fuzz pedal?
Yeah, and what's the fuzz pedal? If you understand the relationship and how the effect is happening, then you can use it to your advantage. So in Dan's case, the Memory Man buffer after the fuzz was dreadful, didn't work at all. But there are other pedals that you can use afterwards that might sound really good. Once you know what it's going to do, it's going to add a bit of high end. It's going to, change the sound. So it's a great example of that. No answers, only better questions.
The thing with these style of vintage fuzzes, you got to work with them. They're instruments in their own right. They are the most dynamic, amazing things, but it can be, a challenge to make them work.
It's the other reason you should own 300 pedals as well, because this one doesn't work with that one, and that one doesn't work with that one, and this is how I feel this week. Well, seeing as we mentioned delay, we are going to talk about modulation and delay briefly, because there's stacking involved here. Anybody not use any modulation or delay?
Awesome.
Good.
Pedal fans.
Yeah, great.
I'd love to have someone here just go, no, I'm a straighten the amp kind of guy. That would be awesome.
We love those guys.
Okay, right. Modulation delay. Let's have a look at, I've got a couple of different sorts of modulation here. I have the Electric Mistress copy by Moore called the Elect Lady, which is really nice. I'm a big fan of flanges, my favourite being my old Green Script Electric Mistress from 1970, I think it's 8. It's amazing. So basically, it sounds, just the amps. And that is the sound that's
Isn't that key?
Yeah.
Walking on the Moon by the Police, if you didn't know that, but
Yeah. I always thought that was a CE1, the old Boss, because lots of people call that Andy Summers in a box, CE1. And then I got an email from Pete Cornish saying,
honk.
saying, actually, Daniel, it was a Electric Mistress that I modified for him. I'm like, okay. And then I plugged in my Electric Mistress. I'm like, that's exactly that sound. So the difference between a chorus pedal and a flanger basically is, okay. The way a chorus pedal works.
20 seconds.
All right. You have your input signal. That is split. One signal stays the same, the other signal is modulated, right? And it's modulated using time. I love doing this demo. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the delay pedal on, right? I'm going to put it to mix to 100%, and then I'm going to alter the delay time going up and down, all right? And then you'll hear. So I need to turn off the dry amp for this. All right, here we go. So now all we're hearing is the delay signal. Now I'm going to change the time going up and down. That's great on jet lag, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
as good as diazepam.
So now I'm going to mix the original signal back in, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get this. Right. So you've got. Sorry, can we do that again? I'm going to make the delay time too short.
I was like, nah, that's not right, mate. You got that completely wrong.
I had the delay time much too long. So I've got the delay time now down to 30 milliseconds. And I'm going to modulate that. So here we go. So that's how a chorus pedal works, okay? You got the original signal, you got one signal, and that's delayed, and that delay time is modulated. The difference between a chorus pedal and a flanger pedal is that delay time. A chorus pedal, that was around 30 milliseconds. If I knock that down to between 12 and 18 milliseconds, then you start to get into flanger territory, all right? And you have all these crossing over frequencies. You get this thing called comb filters, which sound ace, so you get the sound more like this.
Oh, it's me again.
So yeah, there's almost a metallic edge to that. It's so cool. But all that is, the difference is that delay time. Now, what you use to achieve that delay and to do the modulation is what gives you the difference in the sound of the choruses and the flanges. They sound so wildly different from each other. And it's amazing to think that all I'm doing is changing that delay time and modulating that delay time and giving a tiny bit of delay. We did a show for Boss in London in September, and I bought my old CE1. And we did this wet dry thing, and I put just the sound of the modulated chorus through one amplifier. I turned off the dry amp. And the modulated sound of the CE1's going, it was unreal. There's nothing smooth about it at all. It's really juddery. And if you listen to just the wet sound on all the flanges, they all sound different, which is what gives them their character. So that's how. So that wasn't supposed to go into that at all, but that's how we get flanges and choruses. Right.
This is how it works. Maybe we should talk a little bit. Let's move on to wet dry, perhaps.
Okay. Great idea.
Modulation can be tough, right? So you're playing, you've got your great sound, and it's really present, and all the rest of it. You stick a load of chorus on, gets soupy and syrupy, and indistinct.
Yep.
All of those things. Anyone experience that? Yeah. Okay. So one of the things we really like doing is wet dry. Does everybody know what wet dry is? Using 2 amps. One only has overdrive in it. The other one has overdrive and your modulation effects, or your wet effects, so reverb and delay as well. Mm-hmm. Should we have a quick listen to that?
Okay. So
because it is a blooming amazing sound.
Right. Let me. I'm going to put the Electric Lady. That flanger is now only going to be going to this amp here. All right. So both amps on together. Flanger in here. So instead of the whole signal being modulated, one side is staying clean and the other side has the flanger. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the depth of the flanger to make it much more seasick, right? That sort of modulated sound, and you'll hear how that works in conjunction with a dry amplifier. A really good example of this that we do a lot is using tremolo. So if we just hear the wet amp with tremolo.
Tremolo's so awesome. Does anyone not like tremolo? Good. This is going really well.
So now if we do the tremolo in a wet dry, we get this. So now I'm going to add delay and reverb with tremolo in the wet dry. You get this.
All day long. Can you, Dan, can you quickly make it not wet dry? Is that possible?
Yes.
No? So all the effects are going to both amps?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're just going to try and, if you can possibly hold that sound in your head, what you just heard was wet dry. This is now everything going to both amps, right? So thank you.
Why that was, important, because with even, there's a lot of modulation, a lot of delay and a lot of reverb there.
Massively wet.
Right.
The wet amp was soaking.
Yeah, but you still heard the definition of the fuzz, because that one amplifier that's just got the fuzz going to it. So, if you're into effects, that sort of a setup is just so much fun. It's amazing. I'm going to do a name drop. We did. I built a board for Ed O'Brien from Radiohead, and
If we could do this.
and
Honk. No.
and when they did the Benz album, he used a wet dry setup, and it was awesome. After that, he simplified everything. And so he called me, we had the conversation. I'm saying, why don't we try going back to that idea? So he said, yeah, let's give it a go. And I built the rig for him, and he came back in. And what was so cool, that day he came in, one of the guys that works for me, we just, we didn't know what filming a YouTube video is supposed to be. We just had a little camera. And I said, Ed, do you mind if I just film this? And he said, no, it's fine. And that reaction when I did the wet dry rig for him, it was genuine and overwhelming. And it was such a massive sound. He's the most amazing musician. He's like, oh God, I keep forgetting
I am
his name.
Dan's memory, by the way.
Yeah.
If you hadn't worked that out,
Music for Airports. Who did that album? So Ed O'Brien is the Brian Eno of guitar. He's a painter. He's a sculptor. The atmospheres that he creates is absolutely amazing. But what that wet dry setup enables him to do, it still sounds like a guitar.
yeah.
But then he can turn it off and just be wet and just go into, soundscape territory. But then he can just turn that back on and go, "Rah," and then let the effects do everything else. But it still sounds like a guitar,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Probably two questions at this point. One is, why not just go full stereo? You can. It's a lot more hassle because you then need... Everything's wet all the time, so you lose a bit of that definition, although it is a fantastic sound. It's a different thing. Two, but hang on a minute. I don't have the scope to carry around 2 amps and all that hassle and all the rest of it. It sounds absolutely magic with 2 small amps. So if you had something like
It's
a
incredible.
Pro Junior and a Marshall Class 5, 2 little amps like that run wet dry is going to sound big, much bigger. And even at low volumes, it can sound massive because you get this bottom end coupling thing that happens with 2 amps. So you don't have to use 2 loud amps and be playing at these volumes. Just 2 small amps run wet dry can be fascinating. We'll go there first, sir.
I have a 4-input Marshall.
Yeah.
I put the delay and the reverb
Oh, nice.
between the channels.
Yes, and that's a fantastic way to do it. We are going to do a show on that. Yeah, it's awesome. That's a really great way to do it.
Just again for the benefit of the video, because we don't have a mic in the with the audience. What's your name, sir?
Tim.
Tim was saying that he has a 4-input Marshall, and he puts. If anyone's familiar with jumping the channels of a 4-input Marshall, if you look at any pictures of Hendrix, 4 inputs on the front, he'll be plugged into one short patch cable between 2 of the other inputs.
Mm-hmm.
It links the 2 channels on a 4-input Marshall up. And you're saying that you run effects in that?
In that link.
And then with it being the bass channel, everything's that little bit darker.
Oh man, that's so
Yeah,
cool.
you can also do that the other way as well, and we're going to do that.
Yeah, we're gonna do
Can I
that on
ask
the
you
show.
Can I ask you what Marshall it is?
JTM 45.
Yeah. Hello, ladies.
Could you do that same thing with Fender bass?
Yeah.
Any 4 input?
Any 4 input that where you link the 2 channels.
Yeah, you need to be careful.
The 2 channels have to be separate. Yeah. But with my AC30, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great fun to do.
Some amps, the 2 channels are at phase, so you just need to be careful about that.
And that's the other thing.
And it's given that you're using the same power section and the same speaker cabinet, it's not the full wet dry experience, but it does have. We should totally try that.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm just going to answer one quick question that someone else had on the wet dry thing. Someone was saying when they use wet dry, they get a lot of ground hum. So this is just a quick 30-second thing on isolating amplifiers.
Using any 2 amps, not just in a wet dry
Yeah.
situation. So if you want to use 2 amps, this is relevant.
Yep. Right. What you want is you want a path to earth or ground. Is it earth or ground, they say in America? Ground, okay. You want a path to ground from...
In North America. We got chastised on that pedal show for calling the USA America. Someone in South America was very unhappy about it. So in North America.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, we're bringing people together. So the idea
keyboard
is
players.
you want a path to Earth. You want a connection between the shield on the cable and the ground output on one amplifier, right? There needs to be continuity between the earth that runs around this cable that's attached to the base plate and the stuff in here. It goes into the amplifier here, through the chassis, connected to the earth on the power socket, and that goes into the earth on the power outlet. Now, if you're using two amplifiers together and you just split it willy-nilly, what can happen is you get a thing called a ground loop, or an earth loop, whereas you've got two paths to earth from your two amplifiers. So it's really important that one of the amplifiers is isolated. You never, ever disconnect the earth from the power cable of the amplifier. It's extremely dangerous and it has killed people. What you want to do is have the second output, the output going to the second amplifier needs to be isolated with an audio transformer. There are lots of devices that do that, but it's also really good if that device can also flip the phase. And all that's happening there, you've got an audio transformer, you've got your primary and you've got your secondary, your signal goes out, signal goes into the primary, it's duplicated on the other side of the transformer, but there's no earth connection there, and that goes into the second amplifier. To flip the phase on that transformer, all you're doing is flipping turning around the input to the output on the secondary. So any decent isolating audio transformer piece of equipment should have a little button that allows you to flip the phase. So if you're using two amplifiers, really important, make sure the second one is isolated and phase flippable. Anyway, that's it. I mean, we've gone horribly over time.
We have gone over time.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone that's come here and supported us. And let me do that again because that was awful. See, take two.
This is exactly how it happens.
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for watching. A massive thank you to everyone that's joined us here at Riff City Guitars.
To Joe, to Nick, to Leslie, to Andrew, to Ellen, to Sam, to Will, and to Ben, who have been off the scale good today.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. We should also say that Riff City is that pedal show's exclusive preferred retailer in the US. So if you're looking for wares such as these, please visit their website.
Yep.
In the UK, that is Anderton's Music Store, and in Australia, it is Pedal Empire.
We might have some wonderful camo t-shirts left, or the long sleeves that you're wearing.
We've got some new ones of these coming out. This is the sales pitch.
I refuse to bow to sponsors. So yeah, if you want to visit thatpedalshowstore.com and check out that stuff, we've joked about boxer shorts before. There are actually some boxer shorts.
Yeah, there might be, although we may not reveal them in this video.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right, awesome.
Yeah.
Brilliant, guys. Thank you so much. Please subscribe, and also
Finally, thank you to you guys who have come all this way.
thank you, guys. All right.
I'm going to, for the sake of the video, I'm going to take a bit of video on my phone just to prove that there are actually humans there, and this isn't some sort of taped. So give us a wave and a cheer, guys.
Cheers, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.